Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with all of you. I'm Annette Benning, and I'm here to facilitate a conversation about this beautiful, extraordinary film called Last Flight Home. And we have the filmmaker here, Ondi Timoner, and her sister, Rabbi Rachel Timoner, who participated in the making of the film. So, hi, guys. It's wonderful to see you both.
Hi, Annette.
Thank you for doing
Hi,
this.
it's my pleasure. So, I just want to start with a few things of my own stuff, my own impressions. When I first saw the film, I was in a very intimate screening room with, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 people. I was so stunned by the movie, by its intimacy and authenticity and the subject matter that I actually didn't cry. And I am a crier. I love to cry. I love being moved by something. But I was so, I think, stunned and relieved, just relieved to have this conversation started by this film. And I didn't want to stay afterwards and chat with anyone because I felt like I kind of needed to be with it myself. Um, when I read a book that I love or I see a movie that I love, it sort of becomes mine. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but it's so personal if I really love something that it's almost it's kind of mine in a way. And I know I heard Maya Angelou once say that when she writes a book, her wish is that the reader feels like they wrote it.
Mm.
And I think that's so beautiful. It's like a secret about you is being told to you that you didn't even know you had.
Mm.
And I feel like this movie that speaks to it spoke to me in that way. So and then I saw it again last night with my husband, who's 85, and my brother. We watched it together, and they had very strong reactions as well. Uh, so thank you so much for making it. It's really a beautiful gift. So to start out, Andy, the story of kind of how this came together is so amazing. So
Mm.
I can't imagine anybody out there wouldn't want to know. I know I did. So can you talk about the genesis of the film and how you decided to make it?
Thank you. Yeah. So I really honestly came from just a really strong gut instinct that I needed to film and even record Dad's voice from the moment he entered the hospital. And it was just something that I felt I had to do. And it was so strong and so felt so inappropriate, frankly, because I don't know, I've never seen anything like this filmed before, right? And so I just but I was so scared to lose him and to forget his voice and to forget his personality. I can't remember him from before his stroke when I was 10. So I think that's part of it is just a really desperate need to know that I would remember him. And I went to see a therapist and she said, you know, if you think you need to film, you should film. And that surprised me. And I called Dad in the hospital and he said, I instinctively know you're on the right track. So I didn't know what track I was on, but I do know how to document things. So I determined that I would set up cameras when Dad came home to begin hospice. And we didn't even know there was a law in California when Daddy was in the hospital and really desperately pleading with us to help him end his life. And then our brother, found out that there was this law, the End of Life Option Act, thank God. Um, and and Dad was able to come home and begin. So, but I knew that Rachel was really uncomfortable with cameras, and I also really didn't want to mediate or distance anybody's experience or hurt them in any way. So I tried to make the process of documenting as invisible as possible. You know, a camera behind the TV, a camera in the other room shooting through an open door, a camera on a hospital tray, just sort of against the wall. And I put a surveillance camera so that we could track time of day so that I myself didn't have to worry about the documentary process. There was no crew per se. There was no one standing there manning the cameras. When family members or friends would visit, I would go and move the cameras and all of that. But there's you know, a lot of time that the cameras are just running with no one there, or they stopped running. And thank God for that Nest camera that, you know, for example, in the scene with Gigi, that's the only camera that was running. So it was, the cameras were secondary to really being with Dad and caregiving. But as soon as I put them up, Annette, I felt so much safer. I felt so, it was like documentary filmmaking after 30 years was there for me, on an emotional level for the first time. And I was able to really be fully present in that room. And I'm happy to hear Rachel in Q&As talk about how the cameras didn't really impact her experience at all. Thank God. So I'm glad we
Okay,
filmed it.
and then it was later then when you were preparing for the memorial that it kind of came together in your mind that, oh, this is actually a film.
It was when Rachel asked me to make a memorial video, and it was 3 weeks after Dad's death, and I sat down about a week before the service to cut together. Rachel asked me for a 5 to 7 minute piece, and as soon as I opened the Avid and I started looking at the footage, I thought it would take me a day or two to find some, you know, lighter moments and sweet moments with Dad. But Dad was alive in the Avid. It was just miraculous as a grieving daughter to find my father there. And also he wasn't suffering anymore because he was, you know, where he wanted to be. And so I could just be with him. And so I ended up finding, and I found the footage so incredibly compelling. There were so many moments that I don't even remember being there for, because I think we were all in shock. And so I started cutting, and I just stood up a week later with a 32-minute video. And then we showed that at the memorial and in the Zoom reception afterwards. The way that the footage was impacting everyone on their own lives was really sort of stunning to the whole family. And by then I was so addicted to being with Dad in the Avid and just wanted to go back there and spend time with him. And I sort of went from like daughter to filmmaker in that process, and really started to notice all the arcs of the characters, of everyone coming in, including myself, who were gaining courage and confidence as Dad gave us that. And also Dad, you know, Dad's arc of really needing to realize that he gave us everything when he felt like a failure at the beginning of the process. That was the most important one, because that was sort of, to me, the biggest lesson of all, which Rachel then summarized in the sermon that ends the film, which is sort of how we measure our lives. And so I just thought this is too important not to share, even though I never intended to make a public film out of it.
Rachel, I am so lucky to have gotten to know you through this process of just watching the movie and becoming friends with Ondi and then friends with you. So could you talk about how you felt at the beginning and what you came to in relation to the cameras being there, and how that was for you personally as well as in your role as Rabbi?
Yes, and Annette, thank you for this conversation and for our new friendship. I'm grateful for it. Yeah, when Ondi Ondi films everything all the time. Like being in Ondi's family means you're going to be filmed all the time, and that's not something I've ever been a fan of. And so when she had been making a movie about me before this, so I was like having a lot of experience of being filmed by her, and which she does. There's nothing wrong with how she's doing it. It's just I don't like the cameras. And so when I realized that she was going to be putting cameras up in our dad's, you know, in the living room where he was dying, I did not like that idea. But everybody was good with it. My dad, most importantly, he was fine with it. Everybody else in the family was fine with it. And I thought, okay, this is not up to me. It's not, you know, so I need to be able to come in and block them out. I'm going to, and because I have so much experience being filmed, that was actually possible. Like I walked in, I remember looking and seeing them and thinking, oh man, okay. And then thinking like, this is too important. Those are not there. They are not there. We're going to focus because this matters too much. And it worked. I did not think about them at all. It was not a factor. Thank God. Then, of course, we didn't think anyone was ever going to see what was in those cameras, what was being filmed. And then when Ondi decided that she felt like she needed to make this movie, I really, really didn't want it shared for a few reasons. It's so intimate and personal, but also there's ideas in Judaism about that when a person dies, that their body, we don't have open caskets. Like part of like honoring the dead is that you're not showing that. And so it felt to me like this is not a thing that you share with the public, but our dad was good with it. And I had to really think about that. And then I had to think about how much good it was doing for everyone. Like our mom watched the footage every single night while she was mourning, and it helped her heal. As soon as I saw it with an audience, to see the faces in the room and the way it was touching people and the way it was, in some cases, changing people's lives, like really deeply affecting people, my resistance faded away and I ended up feeling good about it. And now I feel so grateful that Ondi made this movie. I feel like it is one of the biggest gifts to me and to be able to be part of for others. So I'm fully in support of it. And I like to acknowledge publicly that I was wrong.
It's the only time
that must
ever
that must
wrong.
feel so good to hear your sister say she was wrong. I just
Right?
want to share that moment.
Let's take a moment and just stop that.
Listen, there's so many things I just want to talk about, but one thing that I can't let slip is let's watch that clip of Eitan's discussion with your dad about how to live life. Can we put that up? Because I'd love to hear you guys talk about
I want to
that.
ask for advice on, like, just how to live your life.
How to live in life? Start off with respect for the one people you don't know and love for the people you do know. Whatever that means. I know what that means. You will always have my love.
So yeah, when I watch a clip, when I watched it last night, I'm just like crying the entire time. Okay, so that's so beautiful. Really gets me. So I wanted to know, is that something you'd ever heard your father say before? Do we know where that comes from? It's just the most profoundly beautiful, succinct idea. And had you ever heard him say that before?
Never those exact words. The thing about our dad is that he was just so full of love all the time. And Ondi likes to talk about this, but like he would leave us messages. I saved for the last probably 10 years. I've been saving his voicemail messages because they were like, I just want you to know you are magnificent and I love you so much. It was things like that all the time. And so it wasn't those specific words, but it was those words are representative of who he was. And the other aspect of who he was brilliant and wise. That was on the spot. He'd never said that before. And all the things you hear in the movie, well, the joke with the vending machine, we've definitely heard before. But
I never had.
well, I had definitely heard that joke before. But most of the things he says are just coming out of him like spontaneously in the moment because that's who he was. And they're such gems. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. The clarity of that, of what he says. And I know I mentioned this to you guys before. The lack of neuroses from him, that is what allows us as viewers, the authenticity, the clarity, the humor, allows us in. So I'm not worried about him, oddly. I know that he's okay and that he's got this mission almost in the moment. Not that that's volitional on his part, but that what he's able to say. Go ahead, Ondi.
I just feel like the other mission he had was to make sure we were going to be okay. And people have asked me, do you think he really believed he was going to watch over you? Because you can see in the film that, several months before he thought there would be nothing after death. And I just feel like whether or not he believed it, he would have wanted to instill in us this comfort. And he wanted to give each grandchild something to hold on to. Like even just love the way he takes his one arm and he puts it around Eitan and says, you'll always have my love. Or he says to Gigi, I'll never forget it when she plays the violin. When he's going to die the next day, it's just he lived his whole life like that. And that's why I had to film him, because I had written a script about him for years. I was always wanting to tell his story because I couldn't from like being a child, take away this horrible injustice that happened to him when he was ousted from his company and had treated with such great disrespect. And he had been really treated everyone around him with such love and respect, and was able to build Air Florida so fast because of that spirit he had. He was truly our hero and everyone's hero who he touched. And so, yeah, I feel like so grateful that he was able to get, because of this law, his spirit was able to rise, and he was able to have this agency over his body that gave him a certain ability to be able to command that room, which was such a beautiful and sacred space. It was his space. And I don't know if you could get that feeling from the film, but everybody who walked in there received advice they'll hold on to forever, or some kind of, some part of him that they can carry on. And thanks to the film, that's captured somehow. But I never was able to make a documentary because I didn't have any archival footage, So I was reading him the script even on his deathbed. I just had no idea that we'd be able to. I didn't know when he came home even that he would be able to be that wise and sharp till the very end. Like, he had some days that he was in and out, but I feel like the Zoom calls and the interactions and the love that he received, and him realizing, oh my gosh, I mean this much to this many people, really buoyed his spirits. And he was able to, on that final day, also just dispense so much to the grandkids that they'll carry forever. So
it also makes me think about, my parents are 96 and 93, and I told them about the film. We had a really good talk about it. It also makes me think, and maybe, Rachel, you can speak to this because this is your line of work. The number of people that maybe don't have that parent, that don't have that person who is in that place when they're dying.
Yeah.
And that we who are with them perhaps don't have that opportunity to have this kind of exchange because of who that person is. And I don't know if you want to speak to that, but.
Yeah, so many people who watch the film say, oh, this was so amazing and beautiful. It's not something that we could have in my family. It's whether because of the personalities or because of the condition, a person might have dementia. There's lots of reasons why you might not be able to have what we had with our dad at the end of his life. And I think, well, one thing that's been interesting is that people have said that watching the film has been healing for them, even if their story was not this. Like, even if they wished for this but don't have access to it, it was still meaningful for them in their own family, which is interesting and beautiful. But I am with lots and lots of families who have some kind of meaningful farewell. And that is possible even when there's family strife, even when there are personalities that are not about, openly sharing gems of wisdom, even when a person might be in pain or have limited faculties, there are versions of this that are available. And it's case by case, it's family by family, it's person by person. But I see so many families having moments when they do some version of a goodbye, some version of the vidui that we did, some version of like an asking for forgiveness or a sharing of a kind of releasing of burdens, where true words are said. A lot of times I'll be with families and they'll want advice for the last 24 hours or whatever. And what I will say is, what I will find often is that everything else kind of boils away. And in that last bit of time, even if there's been a lot of conflict, a lot of times what's left is love. And I see that quite a lot in families that wouldn't expect that to happen. So there's a range of what happens. And one of the things about this film is it is about death. And of course, we in many cases can't control how we die or what those conditions are, but it's also about life. And one of the things I really want to tell people from this is, like, you don't have to wait until the end to have conversations like this with your family. And you don't know what the end's going to be like. They might not be fully as present or able, but now, if they are, have the conversation now, no matter what age they are, because that is definitely something that we all can do.
Can you talk about the vidui? It's this one of the sections of the film that sticks with me so much. There's so many different ways to talk about it, but one thing I just want to highlight is the exchange between the two of you and what happened. That's very beautiful, and it's beautiful that you included it because that dynamic is so identifiable, certainly to me, and I think to a lot of people. So you're acting within a family system, you're acting as siblings, even as you're a rabbi and you're the filmmaker and the daughter. And so can you talk about that, please? I love that.
Ondi, you want to start?
So, you know, I was the only child that didn't have the only, you know, daughter, son of Eli that didn't have a job right then that could, as an independent filmmaker, clear my schedule and be there. And I knew Rachel couldn't come out till 5 days before, but we talked, and you know, I said, Rachel, these are the challenges. Dad feels like a failure and a burden when he gave us everything and provided us with everything. He thinks he provided us with nothing. And Mom isn't facing this. She's avoiding him. And I think she's just doesn't know what's about to happen and to come. And you see that call because Morgan, my now wife, filmed it. But it was like special forces arrived when Rachel came. You know, I did spend that time producing the end of his life. I did take that time to kind of line up calls with everybody in different walks of life that wanted to say goodbye to him. I put the word out, and I think that that's one of the greatest things about the gift of this law was having this waiting period where we could actually plan. And so he did have get to talk to his first pilot and his first flight attendant and, you know, people that he touched deeply. And he understood more of that by the time Rachel came. But it was like, as soon as she walked in the door, he said, I'm crying inside, and told her how he felt he was a failure because he was in debt, and he was indebted to his friends, and he borrowed too much, and and so it was all this money stuff. And you know, I had filmed him checking his bank account and all of this kind of stuff, but Rachel said, well, I could do this deathbed confessional with him. It's a Jewish deathbed confessional. And so we sat down the day before, 2 days before he died. And Rachel started to talk, and she said, would you join me? So I sat with her. And what happened was he started calling himself these terrible names that were so painful for us to hear, and called himself dumb and all these things. And I was like, but you lost your money because you held onto your stock because you didn't want to devalue it for your employees. Like, I knew that he lost it all because he was a good man. And I wanted to remind him of that. And the reason I left it in when Rachel says, no, stop, here's the exercise. And she shuts me down and I start to talk. And I left it in because I was like, you know, most of us, I think, would try to take someone's shame, help them in that moment. And it was a very powerful lesson for me that you can't take people's shame away. They have to let it go themselves. And it's a process that Rachel said will make him feel better, but not right now. Like right now, he's just going to have to go through this himself, kind of thing. And I was surprised by it, honestly. And I thought it was an important a part of the learning of the film, you know. But Rach, what do you want to say about it? You're sorry? Just kidding.
First of all, I was gentler than you just portrayed, but oh yeah, okay. But
you can decide for yourself, audience.
Okay, fine. That is decide for themselves. I think that, look, we all walk through the world with regrets and things we're not proud of. And in the tradition, the vidui is about, the English word would be, the closest word would be sin, but it's about the ways we've made mistakes and done wrong. But it can be any way that we feel remorse, anything that's heavy on us about the way we lived. And I find that to broaden that out, to not use the word sin, because that is, first of all, the English word doesn't even approximate what's being said in Hebrew, but the idea of, you know, what is it that's weighing you down? It could be anything. It could be mistakes. It could be ways that you feel like you fell short in life. It could be ways that you had a vision for your life and it didn't turn out that way. Regrets, remorse. It's such an important thing to release it. And on every year, on Yom Kippur that we're supposed to do that, like a whole cleansing every year. We're even supposed to do it every day. But then we're definitely supposed to do it at the end of our lives. And that's also something you don't have to be Jewish to take from that. You know, there are other traditions that have versions of that, but I think it's a beautiful thing to do at the end of a life, is to invite a person to lay down their burdens.
It's beautiful. I do want to ask about, can you explain the End of Life Option Act, and not only in the state of California where this was made, but in the country? And I also want to hear from you, Rachel, about the intersection of this with Judaism. And I think there's been a recent kind of evolution in that way. And I'd love to hear about that. I know my husband was asking me about that, and I'm also very interested in that.
And do you want to start with end of life, or do you want me to end of life option next?
Well, I'll say that we didn't, you know, I didn't, even when I was editing this, intend to make a political film. But sometimes the most personal can be the most political. And I know that our whole family shares the true desire that this film help to change the law and make this basic human right possible for people that terminally ill people in New York and in many, many other states. I mean, it's only a right in 10 states in the United States. And it's so, because our society doesn't talk about death, we don't even know, many of us don't even know the law exists where we live. Like, we didn't know that. So I think, you know, I hope that this film will continue to bring awareness around the topic, because so many people have come to us since seeing it and even told us that they helped their parents die illegally, or that, you know, they had to hold their parents who were begging them to help, who died terrible, painful deaths over many years, and that they wished they had this right. So I think our right over our own body is something that's very much in the news right now and talked about, and it's something that we should consider not only for birth but for death is very important. So the End of Life Option Act is in California, and at the time that I made this film and Daddy was going through this, it was a 15-day waiting period, and during that time, doctors assess whether or not the patient is of right mind, is doing it for, you know, for the right reasons, and not, you know, not being forced by the family, for example. And so there was quite a lot of that to go through. And now the waiting period is reduced to 2 days in California since the film. And also the obstacle course that you see us have to race at the end, where it's sort of, the film tips into sort of being a thriller, people have said, because it's horrible what Dad has to go through at the very end, and taking all these drinks and not being able to hold the glass and all of that. That has become more streamlined in California. Now they have flavored drinks and also one step as opposed to 3. So progress is being made in California, but there's a long way to go in the country in general. And then also Rachel, you know, Rachel's resistance to sharing the film was also very serious in that it was a violation of Jewish law at the time that we made the film. Rachel, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, when I realized that it was happening and it was going to be at Sundance, I realized I had to kind of come out in the Jewish world about this, because here I am, a rabbi on film with my father, helping him end his life. Jewish law has forbidden that for thousands of years. And not just Orthodox Jewish law, but all the movements of Judaism had a ban on this. And so I wrote a public thing in the foreword, which is a Jewish publication, and kind of ducked and covered for people to attack me. And that's not what happened. I got hundreds of messages from people who had been with their parents or their loved ones who desperately wished for this, or who had, done this and thought that the Jewish law needed to be reconsidered. And soon after it showed at Sundance, the Reform movement, and I don't know that these were related things, but the Reform movement of Judaism, which is the movement that I'm a part of, convened their kind of legal body and reconsidered the question after centuries. and completely reversed the position in the reform movement, saying that, as Ondi likes to quote, they quoted Joseph Soloveitchik, a famous rabbi, saying, "A law without tenderness is wickedness," and talking about that the original intent in Jewish law was to honor life. It was to never ever devalue life. And the question now, when they were writing this law, the average time of death, from onset of illness to death was like a week or 5 days. Now it can be years and years and years. It's a different set of conditions. And the reform movement feels now that we have to respond to these different conditions. And what it looks like to honor life can be, when a person is terminally ill already, they are going to die soon, to allow them to have agency in how that end happens is a way of honoring their life. It is not cheapening their life. And they make a distinction between living and existing, and that current medical technologies often extend existence for a long, long time after quality of living has ended and a person no longer wants to be in the world. And that part of what it is to honor them is to listen to what they are seeking at that time. So the reform movement did that, and the conservative movement also has made a statement softening their position. And so these are the major liberal parts of Judaism. It's now, in the last year, has changed.
That's amazing. Seeing the teenagers in the movie is very touching to me. I have 4 kids, and they're in their 20s, and my oldest is in his 30s. But how they interacted in the movie and they were part of what happened is very touching. And I guess this is kind of a personal question, but I'm wondering about how this experience between all of you and you with your children and going through this with your dad, did it change the family dynamic at all, or the way that people are communicating with each other? I know that the night that I went to the screening the first time was your mom was there, and she got up very willingly afterwards to speak and to be asked questions. And she was open about something that had happened between her and Rachel and your dad. And she was really anxious to, not anxious, she was very open. And I could feel there was a therapeutic kind of experience for her to just say, okay, this is it, people. Let's just put it on the table. This is our family. This is who I am. She even sort of mentioned something that she kind of felt not great about that she had done as a mom, which what mom doesn't relate to that? Oh my God. So I'm just curious about this dynamic within your family, and did the film kind of help you guys to, I don't know, communicate in a different way?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, we are having more contact, especially me. I'm the one who I live on the other coast. I have the least kind of regular daily contact. Andy and David and my mom, our mom, like are all like a little pod all the time. But I'm the least part of it, and we are now. I mean, we're in touch pretty much every day about this. So we're on this text chain. There's constant stuff going between all of us. We're traveling often together. We're at festivals or at screenings and on these panels together and talking about our family and talking about our father and talking about us. And yes, I feel like it's drawn us all a lot closer. And I feel like there's a way that I feel like our dad is like at least observing it with pleasure, if not having a hand in
it. Yeah, this is his favorite thing, is having the family together and close. So he really wanted to make sure mom would be okay, and mom is very held by this whole experience, as you noted, Annette. It's this Sunday I'll be in England with the film and heading to Copenhagen, and Rachel will be flying to LA to be with David and mom at the LA screening. And wow, every time that the movie shows, it just fills her heart that people love her Eli, and that Eli lives in their hearts now. It's just, and she still watches the film almost I spoke to her after the screening here in New York last night, and she was like, you know what, I think I'll put it on again right now. Puts it on almost every day. So she's seen the film about 500 or 600 times. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, really? That's incredible.
It's how she spends time with Dad, you know? She just loves it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciated the way she went through the process because I felt like there was she was who she was. She wasn't trying to, I mean, what I got was that she wasn't trying to be something else. Could we watch the clip which includes her in her rollers and then it goes into the medical aid? I love that. I love that section. And also I wanted to talk about the nurse and the medical aid and the professionals who participate in this process because they're so important. Could we see that?
I can't believe
Thank
this
you.
whole 15 days that this is happening. I mean, it's just there's an unreality to it all. Yeah?
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it'll be over.
You don't even know what to expect, how to feel.
Yeah.
Well, what are we talking about in terms of time? How long will it take?
I would say give it about 3 hours, but remember, he could go really fast, so I just don't know.
I mean, to know this is coming is a luxury.
Yeah,
And to have him sharp,
yeah,
you must have several Alzheimer's patients.
yeah.
That's heartbreaking.
They don't get this choice. They can't have any cognitive issues at all, otherwise they don't qualify.
I think it's really courageous work you're doing,
Thank
being a
you.
hospice nurse and doing end of life.
Like I was telling your mom, not all doctors will do it. Not all pharmacies will participate in the medication, and not all nurses will do it. So I find it very genuine what I get to do, and very honoring what I get to do. Is it hard? Yes. Does it get any easier? No. And the moment it does get easier is the moment I need to change careers, because I don't ever want to lose that humanity in me.
Yeah.
That's so incredible. Can you talk about the professionals that you interacted with a little bit, and also there's the great moment when your dad is talking to the doctor and he's kind of bullshitting him a little bit, and your dad says something like, I don't have to look forward to not having to put up with your bullshit or something like that. That was such a great moment. So honest, so real, so refreshing.
So so that's Candace Carsey. She's fantastic. She was a godsend. She was always advocating for Dad, for his right
Excuse
mind.
me, is she an RN?
She's a nurse. Yeah, she's a hospice nurse.
She's an RN.
Mm-hmm.
She's a hospice nurse. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And she's just like a member of the family now. I mean, we're just always in touch. And also Janice Powell, the social worker, as well. And the doctors, they love the film. Everyone loves the film who's in this, because they're the silent heroes of so many people's lives. And they've made such an incredibly courageous decision to be in this line of work. And we've talked about what makes this, so many people have talked about the end of their loved ones' lives with me now that I've made this. And everybody says there's something that happens in that room where nothing else matters outside of it. And it's like a pure presence that is just truly, it just doesn't happen in life outside. I've never experienced it before or since. And Candace lives in that world a lot of the time. you know, and helps people a lot of the time. And she's very convinced that there's a veil that lifts, that sort of between life and death. And she's observed it with so many people who can see their loved ones as they're heading towards death. And it, you know, the process is very sacred, but also it's very comforting to know that death is not the end. And I don't think I knew that before this, you know. But yeah, I learned so much from these people. And, you know, as I didn't articulate well enough before, the reason for making this film is to really share this most transformative and greatest learning experience that I've ever had. That is something we all have to go through. And I think that we were very blessed that this particular group of hospice workers were open to us filming and part of the team. Even that doctor who Dad says, I have to put up with your horse shit. He's not a proponent of end of life option act. He's the doctor who's skeptical on it. And so it was very scary when Dad couldn't remember if he had eaten that day or what day it was. I mean, how can you know what day it is anyway when you're lying in a bed? And, you know, so he was failing the questions. And I think when he said, I'm tired, you know, I have to put up with a little more of your bullshit, the doctor got a sense of like, okay, this guy he might not remember if he ate lunch, but he's a firecracker, you know? So.
Yeah, that was, incredible. Is there anything that you just want to share in terms of what you got to ask or what you got to do in relation to your parent that maybe is not even in the film? I mean, the opportunity to have the moments that you had, maybe a few of us out there still have our parents. Is there something that you want to share? And maybe Rachel, you could speak to that.
I think every family is different. For me, one of the things that was hard but meaningful, was that my dad was insisting that I be his rabbi and not just his daughter. And I was reflecting that one of the gifts that gave me was that it gave me permission to sing. And I spent a lot of from when I arrived, the last 5 days of his life, just singing. You don't necessarily hear it in the film all the time, but like I was singing hours and hours and hours every day, sitting by his bed. And that's part of how I express myself. It was comforting for me, but it was also, he expressed that it was comforting for him. And that was so meaningful to me to be able to do something that was comforting for him. And that's a way of answering for you about people who still have parents who are living, is just finding those points of connection with them that are mutually meaningful and genuine to who you are together, or who you are and perhaps your parent can relate to. That just points where you can kind of touch in together on your love, or on your relationship of life, just chances to be intimate with each other. I think that's everything. And I think that is you said at the beginning that our dad was a non-anxious presence. Like he made it possible for us to be real with him and to bring whatever we had to the bed. And he met us there. And not everyone will do that, but we can do that. As the one who's not dying, we can come. And that's the other thing is not only to bring what we have, but also to receive, to just sit in silence. And a lot of times, some of the most meaningful things I see for people at end of life is just the willingness to sit, just be present in silence. And then things sometimes will come that you don't expect if you're just present and silent.
I'll say this, my son, you asked how the grandkids were affected by this. And we've actually had the opportunity for them to participate in several Q&As. And in fact, the president of Oberlin, where two of the grandkids go to school, added a screening over Parents Weekend. And my son mentioned that Rachel's singing actually helped him greatly through the day of Dad's death. And I just thought that was, not everybody can have a rabbi in the family. but it was pretty great having Rachel there, showing up as sort of the shepherd for us all, like carrying us through across this sort of terrifying chasm. Because the way I tried to edit the film was to really have you feel, as much as this was a gift to have, as dad said to me off camera, wouldn't you rather know the date than get a call in the middle of the night that I'm gone? And yes, but it's also really scary. And it was really, really scary. And it felt like we were all sort of walking this plank together. And the fact that we were able to come together and be together was, I think, the greatest part. I just felt myself so grateful to be part of this family that, was formed. Sort of, we came together as the T-team. Mom was brilliant to have us come together as this team when Dad had the stroke. Rather than go into our own corners of pity and despair, we came together and we rallied. And I felt like 40 years later, Dad says, I've done my time. He said this off camera also, Annette. He said, I've served my sentence and I've got to go. And we were able to come, and now we're adults, and we were able to bring everything we had, to it. And I think thanks to this law, we were able to find closure. And all of the kids are carrying their grandfather with them in a way that I don't think would have been possible. They would have been in college, they would have been away, but they were able to come home and be with him. And as Rachel said, and as I urged my mom to do in the film, to just sit with him. And he would just say the most extraordinary things. I mean, there's too many to possibly share with you on this.
I think that the movie also can, we've sort of touched on this already, but it can also help those of us who don't have an Eli, and maybe we don't have a family that can interact in the way that you all can, but that there's a part that there's something that we can do as the person who's not the person dying, that even whatever their attitude towards death is, we can bring ourselves to it maybe in a different way, having seen this. I think we have an audience member who wants to join in and ask a question.
Hey, Ondi. And hey, Rachel.
Hi.
First of all, Ondi and Rachel, huge congrats. It's incredible. And I also wanted to say your memorial video was really beautiful as well. My question would be, being someone who also did a short documentary about my own father's passing, I was wondering, Ondi, did you ever come to a moment where it was obviously so emotionally heavy where you felt like giving up, or it was too heavy to continue on? Did you ever want to kind of stop the project just out of the emotional heaviness of the whole process?
I had I had a secret screening in Birmingham, Alabama of a rough cut. The movie flew through me so fast. It just like sort of was almost involuntary in the editing process too. It was just like I knew what to do and I was just doing it. And then I thought, oh my gosh, is this like going to be like sharing my bat mitzvah video or something? Like, is this too personal? What is this? And it wasn't as much that it was hard for me, because it was in a lot of ways the way that I grieved was to be doing this, like laughing and crying with Dad through the night. So a friend of mine runs a film festival in Birmingham, Alabama called Sidewalk. And she said, what do you have anything to show this year? And I said, well, I think I have a short about my father. And then I called her a few weeks later. I'm like, actually, it's a feature. And it's really rough. So I don't want anyone to know it's me or the title. Just put it on. If you want to do a secret screening, that's fine. So she played it in the afternoon for 100 people. And right as it started, a couple of people stood up and we thought they were like leaving the cinema, like within the first 10 minutes. And Morgan leaned over, we were sitting in the back, and she said, I think this was a terrible idea. And I was like, well, at least it's in Birmingham, or no. But afterwards, it was like, those people were just getting popcorn. And afterwards, it was a standing ovation. And these boys stood up in the back who were like 20 years old. And they said, like, we now have a role model. We now have a man that we can actually look up to and try to be. And to me, that was like all the impetus I needed to go back and actually finish the film. So no, the death of Dad was very, very difficult for me to edit. But the worst part was when I became desensitized to it because I'd been editing it so much that it wasn't even, I was sort of like disconnected from it.
Sure, it's almost like a therapeutic session.
The therapeutic part, Courtney, has been sharing it.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't take away Dad's suffering all those years, that every time that someone's helped by the film, and so many people seem to be, even last night, someone said, I feel so much better about the death of my own father, you know, and one friend actually, a colleague, had got in touch with his dad after 10 years of being estranged. So when those things happen, I just feel like Dad's suffering is somehow transmuting into something that's very healing. And the cross I've had to bear since I was 10 gets lighter and lighter and lighter. So it's an incredibly healing process. I've never understood the magic of film before this in this way.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful film, and I'm so proud of you, Ondi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Courtney. Thanks for coming on. And like that, the internet. Oh, there's another person.
Oh, great. Please, we have another audience member who wants to ask a question.
Hi there. Hey.
All the way from Vienna.
All the way from Austria. Yeah, it's evening time. I'm on my wine. But it's great. Thanks for doing this. Listen, it was great. So many of my questions were already answered, but I still have something I would like to ask you. For me, it's all about the dynamic of making a film, right? As a filmmaker, I'm wondering, like, what's it like to be in such an intimate position with your family? I mean, if I would put a camera in front of my family, they would just tell me to get lost right away. Like no way I could ever film something personal like that. But you talked about that in the beginning, and Rachel, thanks for sharing that process, because I was really interested in how is this possible with a family? But were you on the sometimes, like, was it for you like a process of dealing as well with what was actually happening? Like, did you, because for me, it's like that. I usually use my cameras as like it's like a safety net. Like when something is very emotional, very intense, very dangerous, I hide behind the camera. I think I'm okay because I'm filming and I have something to focus on. The button needs to be red. You need to make sure there's sound. And did that process, was that similar for you, that you sometimes thought, thanks God I have this project so I can deal with it? And maybe that was the same case for the family, that they had something else that was there. I don't know.
I felt like thank you, Richard, for asking. And I don't know if you two know, but Richard's an incredible filmmaker. But I was just going to say, like I kind of said, it made me feel safe that I wouldn't forget Dad. But there was something else to it, which is the camera for me is like a bridge. It actually allows me to go deeper, focus more. And I was worried that I was going to mediate my experience, but it was quite the opposite. In fact, I could use it was something that I knew I could do to provide for the family. It was like, it gave me a mission when I seated my seat next to Dad, really to Rachel, to let her be with him in those final days. I was able to be behind the camera, and I could hear, I found my brother behind the camera listening to his kids talking to Dad, because the lav mics went into this camera that was in the other room that was out of sight. And so we could give space to people to be around the bed and give them that time with Dad, but we could also hear what was going on and participate in that way. And I think the footage got more and more important to everybody in the family the closer that we came to March 3rd. It was like, well, at least we'll have this footage, So I think on that level, the family, Mom, for example, was like more and more comforted knowing that there was documentary footage. And I think Dad, on some level, knew that this would be what we would have at the end. And I don't know, I know that it was his gift to me and to the family, but I don't know that he knew it would be a gift to the world. But you know, I think he is watching, and I think he is pretty happy about it. Yeah. So, but yes,
Amazing.
it was helpful. It helped me to focus actually more, be more present.
Thank you. Amazing film. Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Do you know, Ondi, where you're going next or what you want to do next? If you don't, that's cool. But do you feel like you're just so now in this chapter of this film that you can't even think about it, or do you know?
Well, I've been making a film about Rachel, and the film is specifically about a project that Rachel's doing in Brooklyn, which she can talk about better than I can. And I will be filming some of that when I'm next in New York, which will be in a week. But we're leaving for Europe tomorrow to bring the film to London, Copenhagen, and Berlin. And we haven't screened in Europe yet, in mainland Europe. So it's very exciting to finally be able to be with people there and sharing it there. And Rachel's going to go to LA with the film.
Cool.
We'll just keep sharing the film. And the film actually came out on Paramount Plus today in all English-speaking international countries. So from like Australia to Canada to the UK, it came out today, which is really exciting because it'll touch more people. And it's out here in the States too. But the film with Rachel is really exciting. And also the film about Dad that I was working on the script. This whole experience has definitely made me want to do a serious rewrite. But I'm more determined than ever to tell that story because, you know, there's so much richness to Dad when he was at his prime and to what happened with the stroke that on our family and how it impacted us. And I can't wait to tell that story, which will be a scripted film. So, but Rach, do you want to talk about our film?
Sure. So my congregation here in Brooklyn is in a partnership with a Black Baptist church. I got to know a Black Baptist pastor a few years ago, and we came together around the intersection of anti-Semitism and racism. There's been a significant amount of anti-Semitic violence in Brooklyn in the last few years, really since Donald Trump's presidency. And then racism obviously is the conditions we all live under, shapes our entire society. So we created this partnership and made a commitment to never walk away, that we are going to talk about all the true things about racism and anti-Semitism. We're going to challenge each other and tell each other true things and say all the hard things and not walk away no matter what. And it's been so much more difficult than I could have ever imagined. And we just keep working on it. And we're ultimately wanting to build the kind of trust out of which we can be a powerful force in Brooklyn to change the conditions of our city. And we're just starting to turn the corner toward action. So Ondi's been filming the whole thing, including some very dramatic moments, really, really tough moments in terms of just, you know, how do we understand each other across our differences? There are significant differences between our communities, and it has not been easy, but we keep working on it, and it's going somewhere good, I think.
That's awesome. We should wrap it up and just want to say thank you to you guys for allowing me to be with you during this conversation. I love the film and I love you for making it. And thanks so much.
Annette, thank you so much for generously sharing your time with us and your insights about the film.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.